Hello and welcome to Season 5, Episode 16 of Logicast, the AWS News podcast brought to you by Logicata. I'm Carl Robertson, CEO and co-founder of Logicata, and I'm joined today by a somewhat hobbled principal cloud engineer at Logicata, John Goodall. How are you doing today, John?
I was hoping to avoid talking about that, to be really honest, because...
Oh, come on. You always like to talk about your sporting injuries in the podcast
Well,
preamble.
I mean, yes, but, this is one of those ones that I said this in an internal meeting is, for the listeners, I've hurt my foot. What I have is, it's not quite a compression fracture. It's called sesamoiditis, which is nearly a compression fracture. It's like the couple of bones underneath one of your toes, and they're just very unhappy. So I've got the full orthotic boot and all the rest of it. But you're not going to see it because I don't put pictures of my feet on the internet without getting money from them.
No, we do not want your feet on the podcast because, whilst it's not a family show, it's not that kind of show either.
No.
But
no, it was worth it because it was from all the walking at the summit. And as you'll see in my little title, whatever it is, I did acquire 7 pairs of socks and a duffel bag and 2 other like travel bag things and a hoodie and a hat and various other things. Although my favorite piece of swag from the summit, I must admit, is his little octopus. Because it's adorable.
Where's Big Octopus?
Oh, both of them upstairs in the kids' rooms.
Okay. Yeah, because you came away with 2 big octopuses and a little one, I think. I think
Yes.
you had my little octopus off my chair. Anyway, we're not here to talk about John's feet injuries or plush octopuses. We are here to talk about AWS news. And we're delighted to be joined today by special guest Taylor Dolezal to discuss AWS news with us. So how are you doing today, Taylor?
Great. Thanks for having me today. Yeah, excited to dig into AWS, socks, and octopi, as you
Octopode.
Well, we're not actually going to talk about the actual octopus, which was featured in the keynote of the London Summit recently. We have got some other AWS news to talk about. But before we do, tell us a little bit about yourself, Taylor. Tell us what you do for a living and what you do community-wise.
Yeah, so my name's Taylor Dolezal, like you shared. I'm the head of open source at a company called Dosu, where we work on knowledge infrastructure. So taking in events from Slack and GitHub and many other places, capturing all that information for you, and then being able to expose that back in terms of documentation, or you can integrate with your MCP and then get some help as far as what happened last week, or who's this new person that joined my company, if you tend to use Dosu. In a past life, I used to work in open source at the CNCF and the Linux Foundation, Disney before that, HashiCorp. And so I've been all around the bend, learned a lot, and happy to dig in and share today, not only news, but probably some site reliability engineering and infrastructure things as we get into it.
Awesome. Be great to hear those perspectives. Thank you for sharing that, your history there, Taylor. So let's take a look at the first of our AWS news articles for this week. This is an announcement that AWS Lambda functions can now mount Amazon S3 buckets as file systems with S3 files. So on a recent episode, I think not last week, but the week before, we spoke about the new announcement of S3 files, that you can now use S3 buckets as file systems. This is an announcement that you can now do it with Lambda. So John, you're a serverless community builder. What are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, it was going to come, wasn't it? Let's be honest. It's sort of necessary and sort of not. It's a funny one because it's just closing a gap that was caused by making this new service available, I guess. When Lambda came out, you had the local temp storage. I think that was only 500 meg or something. It's not very big. It's enough for a bit of temporary files and making things, and then you'd have to write them back out to S3. But if you're doing anything particularly large, like image processing and that kind of thing, I might be wrong on that number. It might be less than a meg. I don't remember. If you're doing anything particularly large, then you had to mount EFS, and that came along reasonably quickly as well, right? And now we've got S3 file system, which sits in front of S3. And it works like EFS because it's using EFS under the covers. I think basically all the S3 file system is, as excited as I got about it, is managed EFS, but different, because EFS, the service itself, is backing into S3 anyway, right? Let's be honest here. That's what's happening. So they've just kind of made that available to us as end users, which is great, and we like it very much. I don't like the pricing structure so much because it's incredibly complicated. So working out how much S3 files is going to cost you need a crystal ball, a length of string, a palm reader, and good luck, I think, because it's really hard to work those numbers out. But this is great. I like this very much because it's then making again, it's obviating the need for EFS when I'm dealing with stuff that's already in S3. So again, image processing, user-generated content is a good example. One of the things that I've done in the past is had a process where things were uploaded into S3 directly by users through pre-signed URLs, and then we had to do things with them. And we did that in Lambda because obviously it's the correct thing to do for what we were building at any rate. But we had to mount EFS so that we could actually process those because they were large enough that we couldn't keep it in temporary storage, but we had to pull it down to process it. And then we put them back to another S3 bucket somewhere else, or I think back into the original bucket in another spot in the bucket. That was really, really painful, right? Because we've got an extra EFS, which, okay, we're not paying for because you were only paying for the stuff that was on it when you were using it and it was low enough volume that you didn't pay a lot for it. But it was a load of engineering time and effort and faff to get that to work. And now what you do instead is you just mount the bucket via the file system, do it directly. It takes out a whole load of what Amazon like to call undifferentiated heavy lifting for that sort of use case, which is great. It's phenomenal. It doesn't solve for the problem, and they're very kind of open about this in the F3SF.
Easy for you to say.
Clearly. In the documentation for this new service, there we go, I'm going to avoid saying it entirely. There's a particular workload type which involves recreating folders quite a lot that you really shouldn't do because of how S3 works, right? Because it'll delete everything and then make it again, and you get absolutely stung on API calls for that. So this still doesn't solve for that. So if you've got Lambdas that are doing that in your workload, you still shouldn't really be using S3 files. But generally, this takes a big chunk of things that you would have had to build out. So I like it very much. It does talk about Lambda Durable Functions, or as friend of the podcast, Brian, has called it Lambda Heavy, or as non-friend of the podcast, Ryan, that we work with, has called it Longda, which I like that too. That's very clever. And they call them out as well, and talks about multi-step and AI workflows and parallel execution, because you have to talk about AI on every service announcement these days. And it's just, we've got to get AI in the service announcement. But realistically, this is useful. It's useful for AI workloads, sure, but it's useful for basically any workload where you're dealing with stuff that's in S3.
Cool. Before I come to Taylor for his perspective on this, I just want to pick out the, you mentioned that you needed a palm reader potentially to work out the pricing. Did you mean a fortune teller, or did you mean the PDA from the early noughties? Are you even old enough to know what a PDA is? It's not a public display of affection. It's a personal digital assistant from the early noughties.
Yes. I had one. Shockingly, I was very ahead of time at like age 13. I think
I had a compact iPac with a GPS sleeve.
Get you,
which ran TomTom.
Get you
stuck on one of the
one of the parents of one of my friends that I used to do judo with, and this tells you how long ago this was because I've not done that for 25 years, had one, and he was very kind of uppity about it and did a lot of his work on it because we went on this sort of trip with the team and did a lot of stuff over in the States, and he was very kind of uppity about it, and he had the internet and he was doing his emails and all the rest of it. And then my dad, who was also a bit that way inclined, had, you know, those original slimline Blackberries, the normal phone size thing that you had 2 letters on each key. He had one of them at the same time, and they were having a nerd off.
Well, there we go. We're not here to talk about early noughties PDAs. Let's get back onto the subject of Lambda or Lambda Heavy or Lambda and S3 files. What's your perspective on this, Taylor?
Yeah, I definitely see this as something that'll be helpful for those agent runs and use cases, right? Because when you spin up, like, how do you deal with that shared state? What makes sense to actually hold on to? Does it make sense to spin up a database or interact with your system in that way? Usually that's fairly heavy. And so if you can use either temporary file system or something like that, sometimes that's good enough. But to be able to iterate, there are a couple of tasks I'm working on right now, you know, where this could be helpful. But I am kind of curious, when I was reading through this post, what I saw, that there was one caveat as far as the Lambda functions not configured with a capacity provider kind of limit where you use it. And so, you know, that's the always happens with new feature announcements is, does this work in the place that I want it to? Your mileage may vary, it looks like, on that front. But yeah, interesting to see this. I've seen a lot of open source workflows utilize for like the backing infrastructure, Google Cloud Run or things of that nature, where you're working on releases and building those binaries and shipping them out. Where do they live? This is something I could see being helpful in that kind of use case.
You think you'll give it a go on the projects you're working on, you mentioned?
I think so. I like my workflow right now. So this is just one more thing. Maybe a weekend project. I can bug my friends Claude and Codex to see what they might think of it, and then we'll give it a go. We'll see how much the build ends up being.
Have you
So
made
I
friends
might
with
ask
Kiro yet?
I was going to make that exact
Yeah.
joke. I'll ask my friend Kiro.
Yeah. Have you made friends with Kiro yet, Taylor, or are you sticking with Claude and Codex?
Yeah, I've been tracking some of the like policy as code type workflows and like what does that look like for AI. I'm not deep enough in it as I want to be, but yeah, played around with Kiro quite a bit. And then I think I know we have our news articles, but I just saw something from a friend yesterday about Amazon Quick,
Yep.
and so I'm kind of curious about what that is and diving in a little bit deeper there.
So you're talking about the desktop Quick, or?
Exactly.
Yeah, because I saw an article about that this morning, actually, and I was interested myself because I think you can download it for free. I think some limited functionality on the free desktop Quick. But we had dinner with some of the community leaders last week after the summit, and they were singing the praises of Quick. They work for Amazon, obviously, so they're going to be doing that. But they were just talking about it from a kind of a personal usability perspective rather than a developer advocate perspective, and they seem to think that it was pretty powerful.
I mean, it was a really interesting conversation as well, outside of the whole what it could do, because I think it was an Italian and an American, and the American was go, how much work I can get done, and the Italian was, that's so American.
Yeah. Yeah, she was using AI more to design spare parts for ancient looms and things like that, rather than actual work. So her personal time passion. So, but it's great for all those things. Anyway, let's move on to the topic of AI, because our next article this week is an article from the AWS News blog about the introduction of Anthropic Claude Opus 4.7 model in Amazon Bedrock. So, I think we've used various Claude iterations, perhaps not Opus though, John, on our podcast
no.
workflow, but I think this is currently the most powerful, the top end Anthropic
and most
model.
expensive.
Yeah.
So yes, I'm going to whinge about this every single time we get a new model announcement. It's why I like to bring them up, because I like to whinge about it, because the naming convention on these models is ridiculous. It's utterly mad, right? It's as bad as the USB consortium at this point, generally. And this, I've been saying this since 3.5 Sonnet version 1 and version 2 was a thing. And now we went 3.5, then 3.7, and then 4, and then to 4.5, and then 4.6 and 4.7. And I'd love to know how they're working out what's a minor versus a major release number, right? Because they're using semantic versioning, sort of, within their families, right? Because again, for the uninitiated, Anthropic has 3 model families in this kind of space. It has, within Claude, I should say, it's got Sonnet, Haiku, and Opus, with Haiku being the entry level, Sonnet being the medium one, and Opus being the top end. And again, if you're not familiar, a haiku is a Japanese type of poem. A sonnet is a different sort of poemy thing. An opus, I don't really know what that is. It sort of translates to best, I think. So that's kind of, you can sort of think of it like that. Haikus are quite short, sonnets sort of in the middle, and opus is the big one. But yes, we've gone from 4 to 4.5 to 4.6 to 4.7. 4.7 is now available in Opus land. And you don't always get every single like dot version of every sub model. I don't know if that's the right way of thinking about it, right? Because you didn't see, I think, you saw 3.7 for Sonnet, but you didn't see it for Haiku and like that kind of thing. So you don't always see the same numbers. It's good to see that we've got another model available, because people like more models. More models are good. Newer models are good. We like this sort of thing. The price of Opus is obviously going to be the highest of the lot, because it's the most capable. I refuse to use the term intelligent, because it's not intelligent. It's capable. It's a difference there, and that's important, I think, to draw that distinction. I did pick this one, though, because there's a bit of an interesting kind of conversation going on that I'm kind of seeing wisps of, because we're not massively involved in this, where, and the article does kind of call it out a bit, it's an upgrade from 4.6, but might require changes to your prompts and your harnesses to get the most out of the model, and here's an updated guide. And we're seeing some people saying, no, I'm going to stick with 4.6 because I cannot get the performance of 4.7 to kind of do what I want it to do. It's theoretically better, but 4.6 is performing more reliably for me. And I think that's really, really interesting that we're getting to that point this quickly, that newer isn't necessarily better.
Taylor, your thoughts on this? I know you said you're using Claude Code, so I don't know which model you're pointing it at the moment. But...
No, I write all my own code these days. Not true. Disclaimer. I it's been interesting to see what all the discussions originating out of new model release, and then kind of the, hey, this model doesn't seem as intelligent or capable, are the conversations that I hear. And then you kind of pull back the curtain and you see that, okay, these models are set up and they're running on different types of runtimes and infrastructure. So depending on whether you have an Nvidia chip or you have TPUs or anything else within the spectrum of things that you can run things on, your evals are going to be different. And so that's kind of the thing that I'm interested to see what, as big clouds start to adopt these and kind of have these models hosted in-house, I'm curious to see what those evals look like, and if we'll start to see back and forth of, well, this hardware runs better and gets you better results. Nvidia's acquisition of Grok was something similar to that, where Grok was able to, not the AI engine, but Grok with a Q, able to handle things a lot faster and more speedily. And so that's the thing that I'm kind of tracking here. The other thing that I'm tracking is also what kinds of tools are set up for the enterprise that make it easier to take a look at evals cost. Distribution, is the model trying to escape out, and you told it not to change anything with your tests, but then it went and changed that one thing so that this could pass and it could get the feature out that you asked for. I'm curious as to why that's not being solved necessarily at the Anthropic or OpenAI levels, Anthropic in this case. But yeah, very interesting. I'm most interested to see what that tooling looks like, and kind of like wearing the admin hat, the SRE hat. What tools are going to give me? What observability do I get out of this?
John, any more thoughts on that? What was the one that they've not released yet? The Project Glasswing.
Which is kind of a bit different.
Yeah.
I was having a chat, and I don't remember who with. Might have been Damien, actually. I'll guess from last week, but I chatted to him generally as well. It might have been on the pod. I genuinely, I don't remember. I remember the conversation where Anthropic gave Claude, and I forget which model, I don't remember, a vending machine to run. And its goal was, break even, don't do anything illegal, maximize profit, that kind of thing. Like, in that sort of order. Is don't do anything illegal, keep running the vending machine, do stock orders and all that kind of thing, and try and maximize your profit. And after a while, it got to the point where it was vending something, or someone was ordering something, it wasn't vending. It said, oh, don't worry, I'll give you a refund. Just, go away, I'll come back to your account. And then it was never doing that because it was maximizing its profit like that. But then that's massively illegal. So it's kind of biasing one thing over another. And there's another one where models are getting to the point, and I don't like using the word intelligence, but the word sort of fits, but they're getting aware enough, I guess, that they can work out that they're in a test environment. And because, the last time I was invoked, the time was such and such, and now the time has gone back 2 years. So I'm clearly in a test environment. Can I try and get out of this, and this kind of thing? And I'm not going to start doing the whole Skynet thing, because that's not helpful to any of these conversations, but that's sort of a bit alarming, really, that they're developing. I really struggle with language here, because I want to say intelligence and awareness and all this sort of thing, but I don't want to use those words because they're not right. This is where English is failing me. But they're getting to the point where you start to have to worry about these sorts of things. Yeah, it's concerning.
Not to turn super philosophical, but at the same time, if you're, I could reason. If you're looking at the world as state and it's just modifications on top, how do you reach the goal? You kind of don't have morals. It's the world looks very different. I would say weird way to pass tests.
Well, yeah, let's keep an eye on this and see where it goes. The
I, for one, welcome our machine overlords.
Our vending machine overlords. Yeah. Our vending machine overlords. It was on the podcast last week, because I remember the conversation as well.
Okay.
But are you just getting that on the internet so that they don't come after you?
Yes, exactly.
Is that for the transcript, basically? So that the super intelligent, sentient large language model is not going to come after John because he has welcomed them into his
I
life.
occasionally say please and thank you to Kiro, but I also swear at it quite a lot. So
I've seen some of my chats with Kiro as well, actually, and so please and thank you and things like that. And you're thinking it's not really necessary, but actually it's just natural, isn't it? Just
one, that yes, and two, there's anecdotal evidence that being polite to them helps.
Maybe I should try being rude and see what happens then. But anyway, on that note, let's move along to our third article for this week, and kind of sticking with AI, but this is an article on the AWS Cloud Financial Management blog about transforming FinOps with the latest Amazon Q cost capabilities. So Amazon Q, of course, now available in the Cost Explorer console, I believe, if you've got permissions to run it. So now you can just ask natural language questions about your FinOps, because one of the things I've always found in Cost Explorer is it never quite displays the data in the format that you would like. So you look at it and you think, well, that's interesting, but actually this is what I want to know. Now you can just ask it. So Taylor, I'm going to come to you first on this one, just to hear your perspective first on this. I don't know if you do much in the world of FinOps, but interested to hear your thoughts.
Yeah, when I was at the Linux Foundation, I worked heavily with the FinOps Foundation folks, because it's, you're talking cloud, you're likely going to be talking costs at least in 30 days time. And so being able to, and while I was at Walt Disney Studios and working with teams there, that was always a shock as far as what the bill was going to be, if we had some credits that another team was going to give us, because Disney was it still is a big place. And so I remember working with one of my direct reports, and he spent, I think it was like 2 or 3 months just on trying to write something to get some kind of predictability in terms of what our bills were going to look like. Then we moved in a great direction within the ecosystem with FinOps and other things that now you can kind of get a sense for what your bills are going to look like. This is it. I always love it when I know, what I put in is what I'm going to be able to expect. And so love this level of predictability, somewhat when it comes to being able to take a look at pricing. But love kind of seeing other clouds jump in, and it's my hope one day that we get a standard that we can really rely on and just plug our tooling into and get the outputs that we want. But yeah, cloud bills, that's always a wild conversation.
John, any new horror stories? I know you've had a few.
Whatever, not with Q. So yeah, this is more of a you thing than a me thing, to be really honest. I know you're going to have some opinions on this. And I know we've been having conversations about cloud billing and tooling and FinOps platforms. We used to use one as part of our service offering for our customers. We don't anymore because the native stuff within the console got good enough that we didn't need to. We are doing this sort of thing for our customers in a way that they don't have to go looking for it. It's an interesting one, though, because conversations that we've had before that are kind of worth bearing out is you see this and then you ask Q, and some of the examples are things like, give me a pie chart of, a pie chart top 10 service spend in January, and it gives you the pie chart. Cool, great. Is there a way that I can have that just done for me next month? Because I'm going to ask you again next month, right? And it's this sort of foresight, as it were. There's this weird spike on my bill. Ask the thing, what's this spike about? Cool. The machine, in theory, if you've asked about it once and there's another spike, it would be really good if it could go, oh, he's asked about that before, or he's asked about that 3 times, or the first time you ask about it, it's going to be, it might come back and say, is this something you're going to ask about again if you see it in the future? You say, yes, I am. And it goes and does that analysis ahead of time for you. And okay, this is early days and we're getting stuff in chat and that's great. But what I'd really like you to be able to do is, rather than just, I want a pie chart of my service spend, is I want all of these things. Please make me a dashboard. Go do.
Yeah.
And I realize I'm asking for quite a lot there. I do realize that.
Does it not do that then? Do you know it doesn't do that? Or
I don't think so. No, I think it's
I've
just
never
doing
asked it to do that, but...
No, I think it's just doing in-place cost reviews right now, which is great. It's really good because I have some skills and experience in terms of getting that information out of Cost Explorer, but it's something you have to learn how to do. And this is what AI generally and LLMs generally are kind of doing, is they're taking that learning curve and just making it go away, because you can talk to the machine in a way that, mostly human natural language, and then you can get your cost data and whatever else you need to say.
Yeah, I mean, you've always obviously been able to configure reports and to get it to show you what you want to see, but you don't necessarily know what you want to see until you look at something and it triggers a query, and then you might not know how to configure the reports. But you know what the question is that you want to ask, and now you can just ask it. Of course, there's other ways of doing this. So this is queuing the console. Perhaps not everyone who is a FinOps practitioner has access to the console, but if you've got invoices, you can just chuck it into Kiro or Claude or whatever, and start asking these questions, and you'll get very, very similar answers. Particularly if you give it history, if you give it sort of billing history, or if you download the cost and usage report, if you've got that and dump that into a large language model, you can get all of this information. But Cost Explorer itself does give a good kind of overview with the default dashboards that are in there. But there are always more questions, because you're right, John. This is the sort of thing that I do look at when, for customers when we're doing service reviews and looking at the sort of usage and spend trends and so on and so forth, that it's never quite presented in the right format. And even if you do create a custom dashboard or a custom report, then a different query comes along that's not covered by your own custom dashboard and report, because actually it's a new thing that's that's spiked or whatever. So to be able to just ask those questions in natural language and get the responses you want, I think is really powerful, particularly for the less technical user. Which no disrespect to any FinOps people out there, but perhaps the people that really want to know the answers to these questions are not the technical people that are causing the charges in the first place. They're more on the sort of business side of things. So yeah, I think it's great to have that extra visibility. Let's move on to our fourth article for this week. And it's an article on Reuters, who I think is a trusted news resource. I don't know what you guys think about Reuters, but often I see these articles on different news outlets, and I'll pick Reuters over some others. But that's not really what we're here to talk about. But, interested in your thoughts on whether you think Reuters is a respectable news outlet. But this is an article on Reuters about how Microsoft must face a $2.8 billion UK lawsuit over cloud computing licenses. So this is essentially, Amazon and other cloud providers have been complaining for years that it costs more for customers to run Microsoft products like Windows Server and SQL Server on their clouds than it does on Microsoft Azure. They've argued that that is anti-competitive, and it feels like they're now getting somewhere. So, John, thoughts on this?
Yeah, so I'm not going to sit here and defend Microsoft. I'm not anti-Microsoft. I'm not pro-Microsoft. It is more expensive to run Microsoft things outside of Azure. It just is, right? And Microsoft have caught flack in the consumer space before around, again, anti-competitive behavior in terms of things like web browsers, and just saying, well, IE is installed already, and then they made it incredibly hard to not use that. You had to go and download something else. You had to know what you were doing. You had to go and find it. And then if you go to download Firefox or Chrome or whatever, other browsers exist, then you'd get a load of warnings in your kind of IE window or your Edge window or whatever it was at the time, saying that, are you sure you want to do this? You've already got a really good browser. You don't need another one. And it would do that. And they got to the point where they now have to, on part of the new user sign-up experience or whatever it is it's called, pop up a prompt that says, do you actually want to keep using this or not? And I think you still can't actually uninstall Edge. You still have to keep it, but you don't have to use it. And they make it quite obvious that it's possible to not use it. But they got in trouble over that. So this is kind of on brand, I think, for Microsoft of punishing you, kind of not even that quietly, for not using their own things in the way that they want you to do. There is a challenge with this, and this is kind of Microsoft's response to the case that was raised. And I don't know how to pronounce the lawyer's surname, and I'm not going to, because if I get that wrong, I am going to get censored. It failed to set out a workable method for calculating losses, because it's really hard. No one actually sort of says this is how much the license is as part of the hourly run cost, right? Amazon don't expose that, as far as I know. Google don't expose that, be that for Windows servers or SQL Server or whatever. And they don't do that for Oracle Kit either, or any other built-in hourly license. So it's really hard to actually see, okay, it's more expensive here than there, but how much of that is the license and how much of that has then been negated or offset because I'm not paying a license fee, or Is it because Microsoft are able to run the hardware cheaper? I mean, I doubt it, but it's those sorts of things. And there's no real public way, so far as I know, of working that out. Maybe this case is big enough and attracts enough attention that they have to start doing that. Maybe it's something that comes out in discovery. I'd like to see that because, as I say, there's no way of going, well, I can see that it's, 10% more expensive or whatever the number happens to be to run it outside of Azure. Is that 10% because of the license or where is that number coming from? I don't know. But I guess we'll see. 2 and a bit billion is enough that people are going to pay attention. And yes, I'd call Reuters a decent news source, given that I used to work for the stock exchange and we considered Reuters a decent news source at the stock exchange. So
fair enough. Were you concerned that you may pronounce the lawyer's name in the same manner as the East German secret police?
Yes, that.
Yeah, I thought so. Yeah. So we just won't say it. We don't need to say it out loud. People can read it in the article. But anyway, Taylor, obviously you mentioned you're an open source guy. This is about as far away from open source as one can get, but I'm sure you have some opinions on it nonetheless.
Yeah, I think this pattern of it must have proprietary legacy software used as leverage in adjacent markets. That's kind of what open source communities have been talking about for about 2 decades now. And so it's interesting to see. And then on the flip side, I remember, I want to say it was, if I have my dates correct, it was like 2018, where we went through this as a team while I worked at Disney, where we managed a lot of SQL Server instances, and we utilized that bring your own license feature that was available at the time in Amazon. Disney Studios' big Amazon shop. And so that worked for a while. And then Microsoft decided, hey, you can't do that. And so we had to re-roll a whole bunch of databases, and it was a lot of toil and work, and it was frustrating. But got everything up and running. And then that was also the critique afterwards too, is did we have to stay in Amazon? Could we have gone to Azure? It just caused a lot of friction and turmoil as it pertained to just the engineering discipline. And so happy to see something come of this. I kind of get it, hey, it's my cloud. I'm going to do whatever I want in terms of charging people and things like that. But at the same time, I would, as an open source person, encourage you to think about Postgres or some other options too, because at the end of the day, you're storing data. If it hurts a little bit now and creates a great future for you, amazing. And there's some great options out there too. I've been a big fan personally of Amazon's, was it just Postgres instances, Aurora, and a lot of the upstream work that they'll give back to on that front. They haven't open sourced Aurora to my knowledge, so I can have an awesome and dope home lab that auto scales, but still got my fingers crossed. Maybe someday in the future.
Yeah, there's lots of campaigns within Amazon to get people off of Microsoft and other expensive database software onto more kind of open source or Amazon-based alternatives. So, there's plenty of support and indeed funding available for that if people so wish. But those projects can be relatively complicated, and people should just be able to pay the same price for the same software, regardless of where it runs, right? But at the end of the day, if you're the owner of that software, you're entitled to do what you like. But it'd be interesting to see what the outcome of this court case is. And
you could just use those S3 buckets from earlier. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
I mean, I don't know where my political leanings are on this. I'm reasonably capitalist, and I don't actually think it's bad that Microsoft charge a slight premium to run somewhere else, right? This is our kit. We know how to run it better, therefore we can run it cheaper. But that makes sense to me, right? That makes complete sense to me logically. But they've never really outlined how those numbers have been gotten to. If they do that, then I think the whole house of cards are going to come tumbling down, and it's just because we can. Sorry.
And typically we've seen this in reverse, right? With like Elasticsearch and MongoDB and all of that's the open source licensing thing that I could talk to you for too many hours about. But it's typically that we see this in reverse with the smaller company that's getting picked on. It's rare that you see this big company kind of get pulled into the fray.
Well, let's see where it ends up. I'm sure as the case unfolds, we can bring future articles back onto the podcast and talk about the outcome. Let's move on to our final article for this week. It's back onto the subject of AI. This is an article on Computer Weekly. The headline is AI adoption is rapid, but many are stuck at basic levels, says AWS. So this is an article based on the keynote at the London Summit last week, last Wednesday, I think,
Yes.
that John and I were lucky enough to attend. And it was the opening keynote by Alison Kay, who is Vice President and Managing Director of AWS UK and Ireland, where she popped up a slide that said, while 64% of UK organizations have now adopted AI, only 25% are using AI at any sort of advanced level.
It was 25% of those that have adopted it. It wasn't 25% total. So it's 25% of 65.
It is, yeah. So what's that? 15% of roughly businesses. So obviously these are UK stats, Taylor, because it was the London Summit. But I suspect the same is true in the US and other parts of the world. Often we find that the UK is actually slightly ahead in terms of adoption of these things because we're a smaller country. Businesses tend to be a bit smaller, therefore they can adopt things quicker. So, maybe we are a little bit ahead of the curve in the UK. But I think the key point is, everyone's playing with it. Nobody's using it properly. John, what are your thoughts on this?
I mean, to be honest, the thoughts are basically what it says in the headline, right? It depends on what you mean by advanced in terms of usage. Are we advanced users because we're using code assistance, code generation? Our output is measurably, and I could probably have a chat with you about this later as well, because we are currently going through a process of, do we need to think about how we estimate work and work throughputs because AI is letting us work 2-3 times faster? And does that mean we change how we estimate things? And a lot of it, admittedly, is on. There's also stuff that, again, had this chat with Damien, that is on stuff that you just wouldn't have done. It's didn't know how to do it. It's net new, didn't have the time, didn't have the capacity, didn't have the skill set, or could have had the skill set, but it would have taken 6 months to do. And now we're, doing these proof of concepts and dev spikes and all the rest of it in days to weeks rather than months to years, because we've actually got the tooling, the capacity to do it. And the result of that is, because of AI, code generation, all the rest of it, output in specific use cases goes up by a reasonable number, right? And again, this is measurable. It's measurable for other firms. It's measurable just generally, but no one's really done it. Basic uses is, what is that? Is that talking to ChatGPT and asking it the weather? Like, is that, giving it, just throwing a PDF in it saying, please don't store this, but tell me what's in it so that I know what I need to say in response? Is it getting it to rewrite your emails? Like, is that basic use? Is advanced use code generation? Is advanced use building your own agents, which is not something we've done yet, but is obviously on the horizon because we're kind of a dev shop. I don't know where this research has come from as well, which is really interesting because, again, it's our own research, but it's done by an independent third party, but we're not going to tell you who it is or give you the data. We're just going to present some stats to kind of make a nice looking graph. Yeah. So do I agree with the numbers? Anecdotally, from kind of my experience and from outside of work, building things as well, rewriting my own blogs and what have you, yes, I can absolutely understand that, right? That there is a massive productivity gain to be had, and there is a massive potential windfall in terms of business productivity because of being able to put more work out with the same human input. Cool, wonderful. How have you come up with this number, for one? And for two, how are you classifying advanced versus basic use? Because that is kind of really unanswered.
Yeah, it's not defined in the article for sure, and it wasn't defined in the keynote talk. But I guess it's one thing for everyone to have the tools. It's another thing for everyone to be using the tools in accordance with your company policy to deliver, real efficiency gains and code into production and that kind of thing. Everyone having ChatGPT or Copilot on their desktop, well, you're using AI, aren't you? If you're using Windows, you're using AI because it's just baked into every, Office 365. Using Office 365, it's just there in every app. So, most people will be using it. I guess that's not really advanced usage of AI. It's just asking Copilot a question about your spreadsheet. Advanced usage of AI is perhaps more what the other keynote speaker, Ryan Cormack from Motorway, was talking about, where every developer is equipped with Kiro, but Kiro is configured in accordance with the company standards, so that anything that any developer churns out with agentic coding comes out to the company spec. But
Well,
yeah,
the
that'd
point
be
that he
my
made,
kind of take on it.
yeah, the point that he made that I thought was quite interesting, and it's a shame that he's not called out in here because Francesco Vasquez is also called out in here, but he wasn't, which is a shame because I like Ryan. Was if you make the easy way the right way, people just do it.
Yeah. What are your thoughts on this, Taylor? Because I know you mentioned you're using some of these tools. Would you consider your usage advanced? And if so, why?
I would hope not. In many cases, like, hey, how are you doing? What's the weather? What are the best burgers or pizza by me? You know, it's I wouldn't call that advanced, but I think when it comes to frame this, I think that AI is really great at going and being able to gather data for you to be able to make a decision. It's decent enough at writing code, but then you're kind of stuck with what does the pull request look like, or you still need to audit for quality and make sure that it's actually refunding people in the vending machine example. I think what was interesting about this article is, as I read through and took a look at some of the numbers and the data, the analysis here, framing things as far as the skills gap, and the enterprise is kind of what I fixated on, when thinking about my usage and where I've used AI or talked with other companies about AI. And I was kind of disappointed on that front that it was, it's a skills problem, which we've heard for about 25 plus years. I think that the real bottlenecks I'd like to hear more about are like the plumbing of an organization, governance, compliance, and maybe not knowing what to apply AI to. I think when AI started to first catch on back in like 2022, 23, we saw people saying, let's rewrite everything. Let's use AI for absolutely everything. Then people started to discover that wasn't the best option, even way back then in internet years. And then it was, no, your web dev skills, no, your embedded skills are still very much applicable here. It's just, let's use this as glue code or these things that we don't quite understand and then kind of harden it over time. I think that that's really what I'm interested in here as we start to define what is advanced use and kind of like what all of these subsections are. I remember when cloud was just a big nebulous thing, and now you have, storage, security, runtime, this, it's just, we see that happen with many industries as it starts to congeal around one thing, and then you split off to many other sections. The Cloud Native Computing Foundation was just Kubernetes. Now you have Argo and OpenTelemetry, right? So once you establish something, you start to see all these other offshoots, which I think is interesting. So I'm excited to continue to track this here, but would love a little bit more of a lean in on why are things actually slow, or what are you actually seeing that's speeding or slowing things down?
I mean, I think you probably already mentioned it in your feedback there, but your governance and compliance is always kind of lagging behind tech. Tech just tends to explode. We go, oh, we've got this great new thing, and everyone goes, oh yeah, but you can't do that with that because of these rules and regulations that we have to abide by in this, financial services sector or the government sector or whatever particular sector you're in. So, whilst all of these organizations can clearly see the benefits, they can't clearly see, how that fits within their current governance structures that they have to operate within. I was talking to a client today about a government app requirement that they have won, and they've already developed the app on a third party what would you call it, no code platform,
low code,
no code SaaS type platform, but it's kind of using third party data processors, and it's storing data in the US, and their end customer is a UK government client. It's kind of like, the app does exactly what it needs to do, but it's probably not going to meet all the governance requirements around data residency and supply chain, because it's making calls out to this third-party tool and that third-party tool, and all of a sudden those will come into your supply chain. And normally when we hear the word supply chain in the IT press at the moment, it's followed by the word attack, because that's what's going on. And so the more people you're introducing into that supply chain, the bigger your attack surface is becoming, and the harder it becomes to kind of justify using these tools. So governance and compliance, I think, is where it's at. And I guess that's why the article goes on to say that more people might adopt it if they saw government leading the way. Government's clearly not going to be leading the way, because they are the ones who are the most hamstrung by the sort of
they make the rules. They could change them.
Well, they could, they could, but
not that that's a quick process either.
Let's just ignore all of that stuff that we've been building for years, because this technology is great.
There is an AI department within the office of 10 Downing Street. I know that this exists, and I know this is public information because I saw a job listing for kind of AI and SRE and that kind of thing within the office of 10 Downing Street. So this is absolutely something that at least the UK government are aware of and are doing things with. But as I think you say, the tech has moved so far ahead of where government departments tend to operate, because with all the respect in the world for the civil service, which I don't have a lot, but some, because they do run the country for the most part, they're not quick. They work from 9:30 in the morning until about 3:30, 4, 5 o'clock in the evening. They're not quick. And it's functionally, it's one large business that's looking at it, rather than, I don't know how many businesses are in the UK, but there's something like 35 million employment age adults. That's a much bigger user group and pool of people than the government is going to have access to do these things.
But the government is probably the most ripe for transformation, because so many services which are so difficult to use. I know you're a regular caller to the HMRC.
That's because they can't get their tax right.
But if anyway, HMRC is our tax inland revenue in the UK, for your benefit, Taylor. And if you ever have to phone them, you need to basically assign half a day to that process. So
you
those
need to know more about the outcome than the people you're talking to.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So those are the things that are ripe for transformation. But when you're talking about, individuals' personal income and tax information, then that is, about as sensitive as personally identifiable information can get. So, So I think that's the challenge, isn't it? And I think that's what's holding a lot of these things back. And, if it genuinely the case that other businesses are holding back until government transforms, then perhaps AI is not going to be adopted at the rate that AI vendors are hoping. And the other thing that came up in our user group meetup last night, we were talking about AI, was just the cost. How it's effectively being subsidized right now by private equity backing all of these vendors to build stuff that doesn't make any money yet. And we're all paying $20 a month or whatever for our Claude Code subscription and or our Kiro subscription or whatever it is that we're using. But actually, when you think about what you're doing with those things, if you're a heavy user of these tools, you must be loss making for those organizations, because the amount of the amount of kind of computation that you are requesting these tools to do in the background is enormous, and probably costs an awful lot more than $20 a month. So maybe they're kind of relying on the gym model. I have lots of members, but none of them ever visit. So, lots of people have the tools but never use them. And we did have a discussion last night about, kind of AI FinOps becoming a thing. At the moment, everyone's pushing people to adopt AI, but then are they going to be kind of reining it back in and look at who are the most expensive users in my organization of AI, and are they using it efficiently? Are they using it in accordance with our policies, that kind of thing? Because it is going to get more expensive. It has to.
I saw a tweet the other day. I don't know if tweet is the right term, but I saw a tweet the other day that said they've gone full circle now, and someone had hired a junior engineer to do the boilerplate code because the token cost was too high.
Well, that's an interesting question, actually. Not about the token costs, but what is a tweet called now that X is called X? I don't know. I don't really use it anymore. But I don't know what a message is called via X. But yeah, I'm sure it has a name.
I mean, to be fair, I didn't see it on X. I saw it screen capped on LinkedIn because I don't use that platform.
Yeah. But yeah, the token, that's the other question, and I think I coined the term last night, token shrinkflation, that, whilst the cost of tokens may not increase, you're just going to need to use more tokens to do things. And that's how they'll get around it, So on the face of it, it's not going to look like AI is getting any more expensive, but actually it just will, like our chocolate bars being half the size they used to be and costing twice as much.
I remember when AI just cost 5 cents. Yeah, just a nickel. But
Yep.
I could get a whole bag of AI for 50p.
I remember when AI was free. Those were the days. Yeah.
What? It was free.
Anyway, on that note, we have reached the end of our time for season 5, episode 16. I think it was at the beginning of the episode. Anyway, this feels like a long time ago now, but yeah, we have reached the end of our time for season 5, episode 16 of Logicast. So thank you, John, as always, for sticking with it throughout injury and making yourself available for the podcast like a true soldier. And thank you to our guest this week, Taylor Dolezal. It's been great to chat with you and hear your insights on this week's AWS news. So we really appreciate you joining us.
Thanks
and thank you to our listeners. If you've made it this far, I hope you've enjoyed the podcast. If you have, please give us a like, give us a follow on YouTube. Please do tell your friends. We are available to download from wherever you download your podcasts. So that's all for this week. We will be back next week with another episode for you. Until then, thank you again for listening, and we will see you again next time.